Hey YouTube, in this video we are going to look at how to build different build environments or build types for our Android app. So over here we have a default Android app which is just a brand new app. Done nothing much, just created this empty project. Um, and we're going to quickly go down here to build variants to see what existing variants we have. We have debug and release obviously. But we could, if you do not have this build variant option, you can click on these three dots and select the build variant option right from here. But yeah, you see we already have two build variants, which is debug and release, which is great when you have a debug version of your application and also when you have a release version of your application. A very common practice to split out the code where you don't want obfuscation on your debug versions of the app because then the error logs are too difficult to understand, too difficult to read, and you can't really solve any more problems there. So where is this configuration being read from? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You go to the project view, go to your app directory and your build Gradle file. So in this build Gradle file, you'll find build types here. Now, if you notice, there's only one build type here, which is release. But when you see in this drop down here, you have two build variants, which is debug and release. Now, these are the default versions. That's why they're available readily. Now, you could set up additional code variants for your Android application, and that is exactly what we're going to do in this video. We're going to set up our debug environment, we're going to set up our release environment, and we're going to set up a staging environment for our QA team. The idea of staging is very straightforward. It's very simple. It basically is a replica of the release version, and all it does is mimic the release version as closely as possible, but just targeting a different backend. And we're also going to make sure that we're going to have the option to have these different kinds of implementations over here. Like you have the implementation for your release version, and then for debug implementation, you also have debug implementation. But if you have any other variants, they don't provide this out of the box. So we're going to take a look at how to create these implementation methods as well. They're fairly straightforward, so let's get into it. All right, so to start off, we're going to just go debug. We're going to hit enter, and we're just going to press tab because I have Copilot enabled, which lets me put in these details. I'm just going to remove Crashlytics because we don't have those right now. So I'm going to remove that. And we're going to go ahead and copy this over to our release version as well. And we're just going to say build types for our release. So these are fairly straightforward. These are just two implementations that build types already provide us, and that's why we can directly go ahead and override them. Now, in case you want to create a custom build type, you can do that by using this method called create, and inside this you can name them whatever you want. So I'm just going to name mine as staging, and again we're going to do the same thing. We're going to disable minify for now, but it's a good practice to enable minify both on the release and the production version because it helps you obfuscate your code. Now, because we've disabled, we don't need pro card for now. We're going to leave that on here. So yeah, we're going to add another property here, which is going to be called application ID suffix. So this basically what it does is it goes to this and just appends debug for the debug version and staging for the staging version. For release version, we don't want to append anything. All right, so let's go ahead and sync this. So when we sync this, you should now have three options here, which is debug, release, and staging. You can switch between any of these versions and deploy these on the app. So let's go ahead and run the debug version. So I have my device connected here. So we're just going to run debug version and give it some time to build. There we go. So we have the debug version launched here. Now, the advantage of application suffix ID is that we'll be able to deploy multiple versions of our app on the same device. That means I could have the debug version of my app, I could have the production version of my app, and I could have the staging version. All I have to do is just switch like this and run, and immediately when you run this, you're going to run into this issue where it's going to say that, hey, you do not have a signing config. Now that's because except for the debug version, you need to provide a signing config for all your other versions of the app. Now, even for the debug version, Android Studio internally takes care of signing, but there is no signing config. We're just going to simply go ahead and just going to do signing configs dot get by name, and we're going to say debug. This basically is going to mean that the staging version is also going to be signed by the debug version of the APK and the debug certificates of Android provided by Android Studios. We're going to go ahead for now and add them here for both debug, for both staging and release versions. But keep in mind that you should not be doing this. You should be specifying your own signing keys for these. All right, so one more thing, we need to specify signing configs is equal to signing config. Sorry, my bad. You need to specify signing config equal to, and we're just going to say here to pick the debug version, and we're going to sync, and now we should be able to install the staging version of our app. So now I can have both the staging and the debug version of the app installed. Now you see there are two different apps that you can see here. One is of the type debug and one is of the type release that we see installed here on in the same device. I can test both the debug version. I can continue building the features on debug version, and if the QA reported any issue, I could actually directly pull up the staging version, try to reproduce the issue. Now, coming back to dependencies, we do have debug dependencies here. So let's say we want to also add staging dependencies. If you do staging implementation, and let's say we want to do the same here, right? Like we want to add test manifest as staging dependencies. You can't really do that because this doesn't exist. Now, in order for you to create the staging implementation, it's very straightforward and simple. Just command click on debug implementation, copy these two lines, and we're just going to go ahead below here and paste it here. I'm just going to change the name from debug implementation to staging implementation. And I'm going to replace this here as well and sync. So now that dependency is going to be available on the staging version of my app as well. So this is pretty much how you create different build environments for your staging, debug, and release versions of the app. You can also add different base URLs using BuildConfigFields if you prefer for your apps here as well. And those are pretty straightforward as well. So let me just quickly show you an example of how you can set up BuildConfigFields here as well. Now, to do that, you just have to do BuildConfigField, and we're going to specify the type, and the type is going to be string because we want to store this string. And I'm just going to do base URL, and I'm just going to put in any URL that I want. Let's say I want debugging. Make sure you escape these values or they do not show up properly in your build, in your build config file. So you do have to specify or escape the strings, right? So we're going to do the same thing, staging.example.com, and let's just leave this as example.com. Now, when you sync this, you should be able to go to your actual code, let's say in our main activity. Now, because we're not really doing much, we're just going to say this, hello, and it's going to say Android. And below that, we are just going to say, let's put this in a column. And we're going to say another text, which will just be build config, the base URL as the text, right? Pretty simple, straightforward. Modifiers do not go here, so we're going to remove this from here, and we can specify it to the column. All right, so now by default, you notice you do not see build config class is not found. And if you try to import this, it's going to throw the same error saying like, hey, there is no class called build config. What do you want me to do? Now to do this, you simply go back into your build creator file and you scroll down to build features where it says compose equal to true, and you're just going to add another line here saying build config equal to true. We are now good to go. We're going to sync this again. Once it's done, you should be able to input. So file is not yet generated. So now we're going to do make project, go to the build menu and do make project. And there you go. So now it creates this file called BuildConfig, which has our base URL. Now I could just run this, make sure we're in the debug version, and you see that the debug API is here. Now if I go to staging and run this, it should fetch the staging API. So give it a second, run, and you have the staging version. So that is how you create different build types in Android. Hope you guys liked this video and hope this was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box. I always take a look at that. All right, see you guys until next time. Peace.